tells them that's what Jesse told her. The only mention of weapons that comes up is when, I believe it was Officer Viscara, asks Monette, does he have any weapons? And she says yes. And that is the only time weapons are mentioned to any of the first responding officers. It's not mentioned on the incident detail report that they had when they were going to the scene. And it's not mentioned by Monette to the 911 operator. And it's not mentioned by Monette to the officers on scene when they first arrived. And so it begs the question, was something, and Monette doesn't mention it to the detective when he interviews her. She admitted that on the stand. I never said it to the detective. And it begs the question is, why didn't she say it if it happened? And again, like, the fact that she didn't say it is not to say that she could have prevented what happened. I'm not saying that. But they focused a lot on that shootout to try and say that Jesse planned this, that he was intending to do this for at least minutes leading up to it. But that is not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Another thing that came up was a jail call, okay? And you heard the jail call. It was between Jesse and his best friend, JP Carrasco, who testified as well. And this mentioned by Jesse that he's $1 million weapon, okay? You've heard the testimony that his bond was set at $1 million. And JP's opinion regarding that was that Jesse was trying to cheer him up, because that was something that he would do oftentimes, especially given that situation where JP is calling him for the first time since this all happened. And it's several weeks later. The reason I mentioned that, though, besides to say that's what Jesse was intending in that phone call, not to make light of the situation, but to cheer his friend up, is that Jesse's been in custody for over 2 years. He's made thousands of jail calls. They brought you one jail call where they're trying to imply a lack of remorse on his part. The district attorney's office is more than just these two prosecutors, who are incredible prosecutors who presented a case to you over the past week or so with all this evidence and all this testimony, with the support of investigators and paralegals and other prosecutors who probably worked on this case before they did. They brought you one jail call with the thousands of jail calls that were available for a reason, because that's all there was.
Object to facts, not an evidence, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, you remember the evidence as it's been received?
What I mean is there was nothing so egregious that Jesse's ever said in a jail call that was worthy of bringing you. And that's consistent. The reason I mention is that's consistent with what we know about Jesse Prado. That he's lived a life of 40 years, not getting in trouble, not being a gangster, not being a career criminal, not being somebody who hurts people. He's been a good man for 40 years. And that has to mean something, ladies and gentlemen. That has to mean something. That is the core question of this case. There's been discussion about closed doors and what happens behind closed doors, because not everyone who knew Jesse saw him behind closed doors. That's definitely true. Monette definitely saw him behind closed doors for the 20 years they were together. And what did she tell you? That until January 2023, there had been no domestic violence.
10 minutes.
That there had been no real issues in their marriage that ever got to this level. And besides, as she described it, arguing with bills and so on, for 20 years, behind closed doors, Jesse was the same man that all of his family, all of his friends, all of his neighbors, the jail guard, they all told you he was. That is consistent with his character. And there's no doubt y'all have an incredibly difficult decision in front of you. And when it comes to the reasons that we punish, we talked about it during voir dire: retribution, rehabilitation, deterrence. You should consider all of those in making your decision. You should consider all of those when you're thinking about what kind of message do I want to send to the community? because I anticipate the state's going to get up here and they're going to tell you to send a message to the community that you back law enforcement. And absolutely, that's a message you probably should send. But another message you should send is that in Bexar County, we consider not just the worst time, the worst decision, the worst point of someone's life, that we also consider everything leading up to it and the man that somebody was before we throw him away and lock up the key. I ask that you consider both when you assess Jesse Prado's punishment.
All right, state.
Judge, I reserve the rest of time for Mr. Acevedo.
All right, thank you.
May I go, Judge?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
You have 18 minutes, counsel.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I do want to thank you for your time. I asked you to listen to the whole case, not just the first few days. Jesse, thanks you for your time. This is Judgment Day for him. And I tell you, this has been a difficult case for me. And I do like to talk to jurors in closing. And I'm the older man in this courtroom now because I've been doing this for 31 years, seen a lot of trials. I've represented police officers in their criminal cases. I've represented people who have been accused of hurting police officers. And I'm telling you, this case has been really difficult for me. Because the problem with this case is that I have somebody that I have figured out over the last 2 years is a really good man. He really is. He really is. And I'm going to talk about that. And he did something really bad. I have family that's law enforcement too. I do back the blue. Now I also check them as a defense lawyer. I mean, I've caught police officers lying and things like that. But I understand the bravery it takes to go to a call. I understand the bravery it takes for their brothers to do extractions when there's a gunman who has not been apprehended. I understand all that. That's why it's so damn tough. You know, this in a punishment trial, this is what the state's supposed to do. It's 404B, it's the legal term. This is the chance for them that, you know what, we're going to tell this jury about every bad thing your client has done. He was a teenager, he broke into a house, and then he got into bar fights and he, used drugs, he sold some drugs, or, whatever the case may be. Like 404B is what punishment is usually about, because the crime gets presented in the trial, and then we tell you, like, this guy's a bad guy, this is what we need to do. And believe me, we've seen some bad guys. We have. I've seen people that are sociopaths. I've seen people that were mean. I've seen people that the community really needs protecting from. And the problem with this damn case is that Jesse isn't that guy. He isn't. And what do I mean by that? What's the point I'm trying to make about that? There's not one person who could say a bad thing about Jesse in this entire trial, besides, the obvious thing we're here for that he's pled guilty to. The shooting is horrible. But I'm saying outside of that, and then the marital relationship for that year where, okay, there's this one slap with the infidelity, and then those real ugly comments that Bonnet says he made all during the time of the 18th and 19th when he's having this breakdown. Because the truth of the matter is, there's not one person who can say he's ever been mean in his life. The only things that we've heard, and they're uncontested, and believe me, with the team the DA has, the biggest law firm in San Antonio, they can go under every rock. The only thing we know about Jesse is that he's hardworking, he's kind, he's friendly, he's generous, he's loving to his girls and to his wife. He's dedicated, he's faithful, he's supportive of his sons, or his son and his best friend JP. He's been a firefighter, he's been a first responder, he supports his military son, he supports his military best friend. Like every single bit of evidence about who this man is for those first 20 million minutes of his life, 40 years, was that he did everything right. A blue collar guy who was trying to make it up in the world and went from the trailer up to the suburbia neighborhood house that he had to work his ass off to get to. But he did it with a loving family, a loving wife, faithful man, not one single problem in his life. Not one person who could say those first 40 years of his life he ever did anything bad. I've never seen a trial where somebody did something bad and nobody could say anything bad about him up until the divorce, the infidelity, and the shooting. Not one thing. That's why it gets me so frustrated. Because yeah, what do we do? I know they're gonna ask for a big sentence because this is, Joe Gonzalez or DA, they do press conferences, police officers got shot. This is gonna happen, like, protect our community, big sentence. But I try to look at it in a bigger picture because there's no excuse for the damage that was caused. I wish there's something I could do to have changed it. If there's a case where I wish I had a time machine, I wish I could go back and stop all this from happening. Because none of it was good. None of it was needed. None of it was really wanted. Madison talked about this perfect storm, and that's kind of how I see it. Because everything kind of went bad for Jesse in a way where I think his control over it was kind of limited. Because a person that has never done a bad thing in his life, who's been, like I said, just outwardly friendly. I mean, I'm not friendly in the grocery store. If I saw you in the grocery store, not knowing you, I'm not going to come up to you and start a friendly conversation. It's not my personality. I'm a serious guy. I love my family. I do things like that. But when Jesse's training, whether it be military guys in the oil fields, or whether it be guys to get out of prison, because the oil fields have everybody, especially when the money's good. And his trainees say, I want to be like you, Jesse Prado. Those are the stories that we hear about him over and over and over again. And then he found himself in this position. I wish I had a better explanation for it. I do, because it doesn't make any sense. And if somebody's saying that he hadn't had 20 millions of a really good life with really good behavior, full of love and everything else, they're lying to you. So we get to this year. And, I appreciate Dr. Jumis. He was court appointed by the court. I mean, per my request, I asked for him. He got appointed by the court to do this evaluation. And, he's an honest guy. I've known him for 15, 20 years. And I think a lot of what he says is absolutely true. There's the trauma of his brother. Depression by itself doesn't generally bring on violence. That's all true. I mean, suicide, but it doesn't make you go out and hurt people generally. And so then there's the issue of what he called the cascading of bad things, in his life with his wife, Monette, and the idea of like losing everything, being behind on the mortgage, feeling depressed, being, strung along in this back and forth with Monette, where he's like, yeah, let's make this work. And then it kind of going back and forth and not working. The separation, having the pressure of mortgage payments behind. The behavior a week before where now he starts calling into work, which is as unlike anything possible with Jesse as anything. I mean, the one thing that man was crazy about was working. That's what he did. There's just no dispute about that. And so something's going on. There was some kind of mental break because there was no reason to shoot these police officers. There was no rational reason for it. And I have a spot in my mind because I've seen so many people with all different kinds of mental health issues. Just Texas doesn't do a good job. Society doesn't do a good job of trying to find resources for people that are having crisis. And in crisis, bad things can happen. But there's such a big difference when it's a bad person who's not having a crisis. But there's some people who just don't care whether they hurt somebody else. There's some people that don't think it's wrong to assault a police officer. I mean, there's so many things that exist in the world that don't exist at this table over here. And so, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do if there was a perfect storm and a good person did something really bad? Well, falls on y'all. I can certainly give my opinion for whatever that's worth. I've seen a lot. Is this a max case? And understand the law is 60 to 99. Okay, that's all the same. So the punishment rate is kind of 5 to 10 for probation, 5 to 99 for the punishment. But understand 60 to all the way to 99 or life is the same. So 60 on up is the max. That's the max. And so if you think of that line of 60 to the max, it means you're going to be in prison for minimum 30 years, probably significantly longer than that. And so this is where I ask for perspective. You know, I mean, 10 years in prison is a long time. People don't get rehabilitated in prison, in my experience. They don't offer mental health treatment. They don't offer medical treatment. It is a place for punishment and to house people that can't be safe in society.
Your Honor, that's all facts, not an evidence.
Overruled.
And so, you know, it's hard time. It's hard time. We can throw people away. We throw some people away. And I'm asking you not to throw Jesse away because this case is different. It really is different. You know, a 60-year sentence or anything above that is pretty much a life sentence to him, where he'll be expected to die in prison most likely. You have to understand, like, even a 30-year sentence, okay, well, that kind of takes him to his life expectancy. So a 30-year sentence can be a near life. You know, the average age for a man in the United States to die at, I think, is 74, right around there somewhere. And do I think a life sentence is appropriate for Jesse? I don't. I'm going to ask you to consider not doing anything in that realm, considering the fact that his life has been a very good one, not just a normal good one, but a very good one. You know, the 20-year mark for him kind of puts him to that Social Security age. You know, 10 years is hard time. He is eligible for probation for a reason, because he's the circumstances of his life give him that opportunity, but the only people that can give that to him is him. I have seen probation help a lot of people. Probation can help people. And as far as whether or not the prosecutors think probation can be safe for somebody, like, I mean, this judge is a no-nonsense judge. She has that reputation. She's actually one of the judges in charge of the mental health court. She's as familiar as anybody in the courthouse with mental health conditions and the programs. She has the ability to put people on monitor. She has the the ability to put people in jail whenever she wants if they're on probation. She has the ability, and this one's automatic, the firearm thing. He's a convicted felon as soon as you sign that jury form. At that point, if he gets caught with a firearm, he's committing a serious felony and he's not eligible for probation from a jury on something like that. So it's absolutely 100% a condition that you can't have a firearm while you're on probation. And he would be a convicted felon. That would be a separate crime. Can they check on him? Yeah, they can check on him. They can do house visits. They can do weekly reporting. They can do monthly reporting. This judge can put him in mental health treatment. Those are things that can help him. Dr. Dumas is absolutely right. Would further evaluation help him? Would treatment help him? Are there programs that can help him come back into society in a fruitful way and be a productive member of society? That's the possibility. And don't misunderstand too, that if you give them a chance like that, the judge of the court, in his case decided the 187th, upon any violation, can sentence him to prison if it's 10 years probated. And again, 10 years is a long time. It is.
Oh, counsel, let me pause you just one moment. Do you need water or anything?
I have water. Just that cough.
Do you need a cough drop?
Lots of cough. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. You may continue. Sorry for the interruption.
If anybody needs to pause, I mean, just please stop me and we can take care of anything you need. You know, I do believe in second chances. I do. I've seen too many success stories not to. The thing about a second chance is if you don't take advantage of it, you go right into prison. I have seen people waste their second chance, and they do time. I mean, that happens too. But I can tell you, on paper, Jesse's one of those guys that has a much higher chance of success. And how do you know that? Well, we talked about the first 20 million minutes of his life. We can talk a little bit about the last 2 million minutes of his life, because these last 2 years in jail, I have never had a jail guard come testify for an inmate. 31 years. 31 years. It is virtually impossible to do 2 years in administrative segregation without a write-up, because the conditions are just horrible.
All right, that'll be overruled.
It's just not common. You're living in a cell half the size of this jury box, with a bunk bed, a toilet, and a metal desk, all metal, all stainless steel metal. I mean, it is what it is. It's miserable conditions. It's only for a very small percentage of the jail population. But he's been in that psychologically tough situation for 2 years because of the nature of his charge and how high his bonds were. So it's kind of automatic for him. And I understand he put himself there. I'm not trying to apologize for that. But what I'm saying is, if you can exist in those conditions for 2 years with a single write-up, where even a sheriff's deputy comes and testifies on your behalf, like, yeah, this guy, not a problem, completely compliant. That's how you know that it's that first 40 years was sincere. It was right. When I tell you he's a good man, I'm not lying. I mean, he is. And when I tell you that these officers didn't deserve it, I mean that too. It's why I don't like this case. I mean, it really is. Because, like, yeah, it shouldn't have happened. Good people should not have done a bad thing. They shouldn't have had to suffer for it. And, you know, it would have been so much better if he could have gotten a little bit of help if they just to figure out when he felt that cascading loss, that feeling of losing everything, as Monette said, snapped, or as Madison said, a perfect storm of just something that fell him in the wrong time. There is some hope. There's some hope. Do I worry about him being a danger in the future? I don't. I really don't. And that's partly experience. I mean, knock on wood, it's the same kind of feeling where I don't think I'm going to find any kind of serious trouble in my life at my age. I'm pretty confident. Now, can anything happen? Yeah, anything can happen. But I'm as confident about Jesse as I am about myself, getting to know him, the history. It's too different. It's too different from the average to below average person when it comes to criminal intent.
3 minutes.
And criminal intention. And that's what I'm asking you to consider. I have seen people get thrown away in this system. Some people deserved it. But, you know, if you do this long enough, you're going to see some injustice. And I don't know how to portray this case to you because it's as simple as I said to start. Man, this is a hard one. It really is. It's hard. I don't like it. I don't like having to argue, like, look at their wishes. I really don't. I wish it had never happened. I really wish it had never happened. And what do we do with him now? I'm arguing to you, I'm suggesting to you that if you gave him 10 years probated, having known he's already served 2 years and 2 months of virtual solitary confinement in harsh conditions and with zero problems, that it gives you some solace that he can make it. There's evidence that he can make it and he can follow the rules and do what he needs to do. He'll always be a convicted felon. He'll never be able to own guns again legally in Texas. It'd be a felony offense if he possessed one at all on any level. And I understand, like, you know, some people might feel that's okay and some people might not. That's why we have 12 jurors, you know, to consider all these things. But if you feel it's something that's appropriate, we'll explain it, argue it. The jury charge tells you to hold on to your convictions if you think something like that's appropriate. If you don't think that's appropriate, well, then what's the number? You know, do we throw him away forever? You know, do we give it the 30 years, puts him at his life expectancy? 20 years puts him at Social Security age. 10 years gives him some years where maybe he could see his youngest daughters, you know, get married or get their professions. I just don't think a person with this kind of history and this history of good character outside of one very isolated incident is a case where it's anywhere near a maximum sentence. That's why he's probation eligible, because the guy has had pretty exemplary life outside of this horrible thing that happened. So that's what I'm going to ask you to consider. Melissa's a good prosecutor. She's going to present, you know, the horror of the case. You know, I can't respond to anything he says. I have to sit down and she gets the last word, which I never thought was really fair, but that's the way it works in Texas in this system. I just ask that you consider, like, yeah, what would the defense have to say about that? Because, like, yes, we agree it's all horrible, and you can play it, and you can show clips of the blood and the guts, and it's all true. We're not hiding from that. But Jesse gave himself up. I mean, he shot for about 15 or 20 seconds, and that's the damage done to the officer. There were 2 shots later at the car. In the end, I don't know how significant that is. But it was that 1 minute that damage was done. That was the minute. all the
Fine.
bad talk before, that was all part of the mental breakdown, because all those messages and the stuff about the daughter who he adores and has never come close to hurting his entire life
Fine.
was all part of the distress, the mental breakdown. And I'm just gonna ask that you consider that and find it for what it's worth. And thank you for your attention.
All right, state you may proceed.
I want to make sure it gets
Sure.
set up now. And may I have a 5-minute one?
Yes. And you have 19 minutes and 40 seconds.
In my opening statement, I told you that you were going to hear that Jesse Prado is a man who, when he's faced with the greatest adversity, instead of finding a healthy way to deal with it, he lashes out and he blames others. And that 911 call is a perfect example, because you can see that all Monette wants is to walk away. She doesn't want to have the conversation that she's had with him over and over again. And last time I checked, she's allowed to decide she does not want to be married to him anymore. But that made him mad. He wasn't getting his way. And so he took a gas can and then tried to light his house on fire instead of in front of his daughters. And then you can hear him on that 911 call say, "You did this. You fucking did this." And then he did this and this. And he didn't do it to them because of anything that they did to him. And it has nothing to do with the loss of his brother. I don't doubt that that was hard on him. And I am sorry to him and his family that they lost Wedo. I am. I'm sure that was hard on him. But it was 2 years before this happened. This had nothing to do with a car accident that he was in over 16 years ago. This was because he was upset that Monette was leaving and he wasn't getting his way. And if he is capable of doing that to these officers who were just there doing their job, what risk does that put the rest of us in if he is out in society? What risk does he pose to the community if he can jump to this? Because he is experiencing the same stressors and the same hardships that we all experience every day. A person who can do that does not deserve probation or a low prison sentence. So let's talk about why. What did the defense bring you in their case? Did anybody that testified for the defendant say he actually felt bad? No. They said he knows what he did was wrong. They said he's a good guy. But no one actually said he felt bad about doing it. The only time we get anywhere close to remorse is when he is in the interview with Detective Martinez, and he tells Detective Martinez, "My fight wasn't with them. I messed up." But he follows that up with, "If they hadn't approached me wrong, we wouldn't be here. They approached me wrong. They took tactical positions on me. That upset me." He never said he felt threatened or in fear for his life. He was upset. That's not accountability. That's not remorse. That's more victim blaming. And unless we think he's never going to get upset again in his life, he is a danger to the community. They brought up his lack of criminal history. But doesn't that make what he did all the more alarming? He is a bomb that went off and caused mass destruction. And what's more scary about that is the reason he went off are the same stressors that affect every one of us every day. There was no unusual occurrence that brought this on. These are normal everyday things that we all have to figure out how to cope with. We don't get to run around hurting people and then say, oh, I've been having a hard time, so, let me back out and I'll try to do better. Believe me, everybody said they never thought he could ever do this. His sister swore on her life. I would have sworn on my life he would have never done this. And then he did. So she can't swear on her life now, he never will again. They said he admitted to what he did. He's here taking responsibility. But is he? Really? I told you in my opening, you were going to hear that he admitted to what he did. But only as much as he had to. Because the writing was on the wall. You can see on that video, he only stops shooting at them because Officer Viscara shoots back. He has to take cover, so he can't continue shooting. And then when Officer Viscara is safely inside, he chooses to shoot 2 more times. He is brazen enough to shoot 2 more times. I respectfully disagree with Mr. Acevedo that doesn't really tell us anything, that he shot at Monette's engine block. Because he saw the cavalry coming, and he still shot 2 more times. And I want you to think about him shooting Monette's car, because he told Detective Martinez, my fight wasn't with them. No, his fight was with Monette. So him shooting at her car is what, a metaphor? Because he would rather be targeting her? She is who his fight was with. So if we would not excuse him doing this to her, if we would not excuse him or put him on probation or give him a slap on the wrist for shooting the mother of his children because she's the one who his fight was with, we absolutely should not consider it for shooting 2 innocent officers who were just there to help. He did not own up to what he did. Not unequivocally, not without reservation, because he blames them, and he blames Monette, and he blames the hardships in his life, because he's got to be the victim. And his taking accountability wasn't entirely sincere, because he wasn't honest with the detectives in that interview. He told them, I was going to come out and talk to them. I only pulled out my rifle and did what I did because they pulled out a rifle on me. They approached me wrong. But that is crap. And you know that from that 911 call. I beg you, go back there and listen to it and put on headphones, because you can hear him say, you call the cops on me, I'm going to be in a shootout. And you know that it's true because Monette told Carol and Carol told y'all that Monette told her Jesse threatened to be in a shootout. There was a lot going on. I think it's totally understandable that that's a piece of information that Monette might have forgotten to tell the detectives in the multitude of other things that she had to tell them. But Carol told them that Monette told her, and then Carol came and told you. And then that is corroborated by the fact that Monette told you she saw Jesse getting magazines out of the back of his car and going inside and locking himself in before the police ever arrived. He was preparing for this shootout. That's backed up by the evidence. Now, defense wanted to cross-examine Monette and try to get her to say, well, couldn't he have just been saying that he was shutting his liftgate on the back of his car? Well, no, because when the police get there, the liftgate is open. So that's not what he was saying. And before the police got there, when they're fighting in the driveway, the liftgate is down. So he said, I'm going to be in a shootout. And that what Monette told you is true. So he did not own up to what he did. He's doing more victim blaming, more pointing the finger at other people, because he doesn't want to take accountability for what he did. Then he brought multiple people to talk about his character. And ladies and gentlemen, I think it's pretty clear across the board, from the friends who kind of only know him from the neighborhood or through Facebook, as well as his own family. They didn't know him. They didn't know what he was capable of. They didn't know what was inside of him, but we know now. And they also brought you the jail guard to say he's been a good guy in the jail the last couple of years. But ladies and gentlemen, the last couple of years he's been in there, he's had 5 to 99 hanging over his head. So of course he's going to be on his best behavior. That is not the best metric for you to decide whether he is going to be a productive and safe member of society when he gets back out into the free world, because he's in ad seg the majority of the time. He's not exposed to the same kinds of stressors that he had to deal with and would continue to have to deal with if he were to be released out into society. That's not a fair way to measure how he's going to behave when he's out in the free world. No matter how much his family loves him or thinks that he has done good things, been a good guy in the past, it cannot undo what we now know he is capable of. They told you that he's the kind of guy that would give anybody the shirt off his back. They said that multiple times. But look at what he did to their shirts. Look at what he did to Officer Viscara's shirt and Officer Swain's shirt. If he hadn't been wearing that vest, his shirt would have been destroyed. That vest and that body cam, these are the only reasons that we're not here for a capital murder. Because he's lucky. This isn't because he didn't try. It's because he's lucky. And because Officer Swain had the strength of character to save his own life, and because of all the medical personnel who intervened to save his life. They also brought up the car accident, the head trauma. Dr. Dumas testified. He can't tell you why he might have some decision-making issues based on that testing, but he also can't tell you how bad that is. He said the one test he gave him was one small facet of a person's decision-making ability. And on that one test, he did bad. But that's not the whole story. He didn't do all the testing. And so he's a bad decision maker. He also couldn't tell you if that's something that came as a result of a head injury or if he was born with it. Are we supposed to bear the burden of him being a bad decision maker and just hope and pray that he doesn't lash out at somebody else the next time life gets hard? That cannot be the kind of society that we want to live in. That can't be the kind of message that we want to send to the community. The car accident was 16 years ago, and there's no evidence that there's been any intervening trauma since. And his son and Monette, who know him better than anybody, said after those accidents, he was fine. They never saw any personality issues, no problems with him regulating his emotions or handling hard things, making decisions. He was fine. We don't see this kind of behavior until he doesn't get his way. Even the loss of his brother didn't precipitate this. This all came down to Monette, which boils down to his ego. His ego. He was upset that Monette was leaving him. And Detective Soto even told you that in the interview, you see his arrogance shine through. He says, they had bad tactics. They shouldn't have approached me like they did. They were sloppy. And he also said, bless you, Your Honor.
Excuse me, sorry.
Okay. He said they had bad tactics. He said they were sloppy. And he said that they shouldn't have approached him like they did. He's blaming them because of his arrogance. That's what this boils down to. He doesn't like that he was told no. He thinks he's $1 million weapon. You heard that on that jail call. And they want to say that that was him trying to convince JP that he's okay, he's doing okay. You heard my cross of JP. There's a lot of ways that you can tell somebody you're doing okay, don't worry about me. Not to joke that you're $1 million weapon after, what, 2.5 weeks of nearly killing 2 officers. When he asked Detective Martinez where he shot Officer Swain, Detective Martinez wasn't sure. And he said, I think in the leg. And again with his arrogance. Oh no, no way. Couldn't have been. I'm too good a shot because I'm $1 million weapon. This all comes down to his ego. He should be punished for what he did and for what he almost did. Detective Soto told you that the #1 rule of when you have a loaded live firearm, you don't point it at anything that you are not prepared to destroy. And not only did he load it and point it, he fired over and over and over and over and over and over and over without stopping until he didn't have a choice but to stop. Every single time he pulled the trigger, every single step he took leading up to pulling the trigger were choices that he consciously made, that no doctor can testify that he didn't know what he was doing, that he chose to do. Every opportunity, every one of those choices was an opportunity for him to walk it back and say, no, this is a bad idea. What am I doing? But he kept on going. He should not get credit for the fact that they are still alive, that he was unlucky in his goal. He should not get credit for the fact that he didn't choose to shoot the other officers who came to save their lives, because that's giving him the authority to play God. He gets to decide who he shoots and nearly kills and who lives.
4 minutes.
Giving him probation is giving him the authority to play God. Putting him back in the community is putting a ticking time bomb back out there and just hoping and praying that it doesn't go off again. Because that's what he is. Because anytime he is faced with anything remotely like this again, you never know what's going to happen. So then the rest of society would have to live the rest of whatever 21 million minutes that he has to live on pins and needles, walking on eggshells, worrying. Is he going to do this again? Do I have the misfortune of living next door to him when life starts to pile on? He deserves the sentence that reflects that danger, what he actually did, and what provides them justice for what they went through. We are asking for no less than 60 years, because that is what ensures that he cannot do this to anyone again. And it sends the message to the community that we are not going to tolerate this type of behavior. You don't get to make these mistakes and blame hardships on it. We're not going to set that precedent. We're not going to tell our law enforcement officers that you're replaceable and expendable if somebody happens to have a hard time when they encounter you. Assess a sentence that makes what they went through that day and everything that they have been through since, like Officer Swain said in his testimony, worth it. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard argument, and
Yeah, I obviously have to start by congratulating Coach Morrison and the women's volleyball team for what happened yesterday. Not just the win, but in so many ways, the way they win. For them to lose the fourth set 37-35.